Today's review is on Emgality. Our reviews are real simple. They're based on two things. Number one, how good is this drug compared to the other options that are available? And number two, how much is it going to cost compared to those other options that are available? And based on those two things, we come up with our rating. So starting with the other options that are available, there are quite a few for prevention of migraine, but it's best to divide them up into two categories. So number one, the oral preventative treatments. So this includes drugs like antidepressants, beta blockers, and anti-epileptics. And then the second category will be the newer injectable drugs. This includes Emgality, but the alternatives would be, let's say, other CGRP inhibitors like Ajovy, Aimovig, and let's say Botox. Botox works a little bit differently, but it is a newer-ish type of injectable drug. Not quite as new as these ones. So first, starting off comparing to the oral alternative, how good is it compared to these alternatives? Is it better? Is it safer? So starting off with, is it better? This may surprise a lot of people, but currently there's no high-quality evidence to suggest that it is more effective. And more effective meaning greater ability to reduce number of headaches, duration of headaches, or intensity of headaches. No evidence to suggest that it's any better than the older drugs. However, the main draw of this newer type of medicine, such as Emgality, is that a lot of the older oral drugs had a lot of difficulty being used due to side effects or medication interactions or other issues. As you can tell by the names, antidepressant, beta blocker, anti-epileptic, they're not exactly designed for migraine, which is not necessarily a huge issue. However, they have a lot of off-target effects. So beta blockers are a great example. They're used in a lot of different conditions. So for example, like POTS syndrome, where people have normal blood pressure, and it is helpful. However, the side effect is that it still reduces people's blood pressure anyway. And one of the main problems with that is it makes people feel very tired. And if you're trying to work or go to school or be productive, that can be quite harmful. And other drugs, realistically don't need too much explanation. I think most people can come to the conclusion that if you don't have depression or epilepsy, probably best to not take one of those type of drugs. Those type of drugs can be associated with side effects such as weight gain or changes in mood, obviously. They may have long-term effects as well. Not to say that this drug does not have long-term effects, but these ones, they're more well-known, let's say. So the main draw of the drug currently is that it has a more tolerable side effect profile. What's noted in these guidelines by the American Headache Society, which is sort of a governing body when it comes to guidelines for management of migraine headaches. They come up with a lot of the suggested treatment courses or diagnostic criteria for migraines. And what they note in their guidelines is, A, not only do the older drugs have a lot of issues with tolerability, and that very few people who are currently eligible to take these preventative treatments are currently taking them for a variety of reasons, which we just described. But that drugs like Emgality seem to be very promising because they, according to their clinical trials at least, they seem to have a very tolerable side effect profile, and that it was somewhat similar to that of placebo, which is inactive ingredients. So that's been the main driver to physicians wanting to prescribe this drug and people being excited about it. A lot of people had been taking these kinds of older drugs and they had not been effective for whatever reason. There just had not been a new option until now. So those are the older drugs. It does have some advantages for now compared to the older drugs in that it has a more tolerable side effect profile in the short term. Of course, long term, we'll have to wait and see what that is. Of course, whenever you have a new drug, you're not going to know what the long-term effects are very frequently for obvious reasons. As far as how is it comparing to the other new options, they work very similarly on CGRP, not exactly the same. But as of right now, there is no reason to believe that one is more effective than the other or one would have less side effects than the other. At least there is no high-quality evidence. There have been no direct studies, and there does not seem to be any plans to do these direct studies. So more than likely, we're not going to know, or people will not know, the answer to those types of questions until these drugs have been around for a long time. A lot of people have taken them, and there's large-scale data to sort of pool and see if there's some better numbers here or some worse numbers over here. There's nothing right now to suggest that any one of these other newer alternatives is better or worse than the other. Moving on to the cost. With the cost, there definitely is a significant difference. As far as the oral preventative drugs, all of those are inexpensive generics. They're typically about $10 to $20, so you can factor that into your decision as you may. As far as the newer alternatives, Emgality is reasonably affordable. I'd say it's in about the middle of the pack as far as how expensive it is on average to the average person. Of course, every insurance is different as far as co-pays and coverage, but on average, coverage-wise, it definitely does not have quite as much coverage as Aimovig, but it's definitely in line for at least tied second place for coverage. So as far as it being available at your insurance, it's definitely got solid coverage, but definitely not the most. How expensive will it be on average after it's covered, though? That we can definitely say it's definitely not the best. Aimovig is clearly much less expensive than Emgality. As I said, if you haven't seen my previous video on Aimovig, with Aimovig, I've actually never met anyone that was not able to afford this drug. There are a lot of different options to get the price down. There are lots of different programs. It has great insurance coverage. I've never met anyone that's not been able to afford that drug. With Emgality, I can't say the same thing. It definitely has pretty solid coverage, but compared to Aimovig, it's more expensive on average, definitely. There are a lot of people that won't be able to get any help that would be able to on Aimovig. Compared to the others, I would say, compared to other CGRPs, it's pretty much even. Against Botox, though, it definitely is more affordable than Botox. Botox is one of the most expensive migraine options that is available. Our final rating for this drug is a 3.5 out of 5. The main factor here was the cost. Since there's no reason to believe currently that it's any better or worse than any of the other alternatives, be they older or newer, then the cost really is going to be the biggest factor. And since Aimovig, which is very, very similar into what it's trying to accomplish to Emgality, and it's so much more affordable than Emgality, unless there's a medical reason to pick the Emgality over Aimovig, I can't see why someone would. There are a couple of other things that I want to mention as well that are not necessarily related to the cost or to the effectiveness, but can cause you problems. I would also say that the customer service level of Aimovig, as far as their foundation for helping people if stuff is too expensive or if there's a problem, is significantly higher than that of, let's say, like the Lilly Caris Foundation. There are a couple of issues with the Lilly Caris Foundation. The Lilly Caris Foundation itself is fine. However, the pharmacy that you end up having to use, if you end up needing the help, which for some people you may need, it's very unpleasant to deal with. I'd say on average, it takes like 20 minutes to an hour to call and get a refill. And there are lots of kind of little BS problems that you have to deal with, like little gotcha things. This wasn't signed on the right day. This box wasn't checked. I never got the prescription, even though you can't have a complete form without the prescription. Just a lot of nonsense. It's not an unbearable level, but it's significant. I'd say probably about 1 in every 5 people ends up getting up a month or two possibly delayed in getting their drug because of these kinds of issues. Whereas with Aimovig, which is owned by Amgen, I can't remember the last time I called and had to wait more than 2 minutes to get answered. The person that is there not only reviews the case, but they also can help you get the medication shipped out right away. And there are very few issues. It's a very smooth process. So given those reasons that it is less expensive and a lot easier to deal with, I have to dock it half a star in comparison to Aimovig. However, they are able to improve if they are able to A, reduce the price, increase the support for it, and increase the customer service level to at least to be on par with Aimovig, then I would say it could definitely be a 4. I would say under normal circumstances this would be a 4, but the fact that Aimovig is just so strong in their pricing and in their customer service, it just has to be a lower rated drug. So hope you found this helpful. If you need help with Emgality or any other migraine drug, contact us at Sustain Meds if you have trouble getting it covered or if it's too expensive. Give us a call, fill out our contact form, and we'll sort you out. Hope you found this video helpful, and we'll see you next time.